Security guards moved through the corridor of Whitmore Military Medical Center at 2 in the morning, their boots echoing against polished floors as they dragged a janitor toward the exit. The man in the gray uniform offered no resistance, his mop bucket abandoned near room 417. A woman in her 50s stood watching, arms crossed, her posture radiating the kind of authority that came from decades of giving orders that were never questioned. She made no move to intervene. Then the door to room 417 opened, and a young woman stepped into the hallway, her hospital gown loose against thin shoulders, her voice raw but unmistakable. "Mom, stop. That's Marcus. That's his name." Marcus Doherty had spent the better part of 4 years perfecting the art of invisibility. He worked the night shift at Whitmore Military Medical Center in Northern Virginia, pushing his cleaning cart through corridors where generals recovered from surgery and colonels underwent chemotherapy, and the daughters of powerful people fought battles no one talked about in press conferences. He had learned early that survival in places like this meant keeping your head down, your voice soft, and your opinions locked somewhere no one would ever find them. He was 34 years old, a single father, and he had exactly one priority in life: a 7-year-old daughter named Lily who believed her father hung the moon even though he came home smelling like industrial disinfectant and floor wax. Marcus had not always been a janitor. There had been another life before this one, a life that included a modest house in Charlottesville and a wife named Dana who laughed at his terrible jokes and a future that seemed as solid as concrete. Then Dana got sick. Then Dana got worse. Then Dana was gone, and Marcus discovered that grief had a way of dismantling everything you thought you knew about yourself. He sold the house to pay the medical bills. He moved Lily to a small apartment in Arlington. He took the first job he could find that offered health insurance and didn't require him to explain the 2-year gap on his resume where he had done nothing but hold his wife's hand and watch her disappear. The night shift suited him. Lily stayed with Mrs. Patterson next door until he got home at 7 in the morning, and he could sleep while she was at school, and their evenings belonged entirely to each other. Homework at the kitchen table, macaroni and cheese from the blue box because Lily insisted the orange box tasted wrong. Stories before bed about brave knights and clever princesses who saved themselves. Marcus had built a small life, a careful life, a life where no one expected anything from him except clean floors and empty trash cans. Whitmore was not like other hospitals. The patients here came from a world Marcus had only glimpsed from a distance, a world of motorcades and security clearances and family names that appeared in history books. He learned quickly which doors to knock on and which to avoid, which nurses would share leftover cafeteria food, and which ones would report you for taking an extra 5 minutes on your break. He learned the rhythms of the place, the quiet hours between midnight and 3 when the hallways belonged to him and his thoughts, and the soft squeak of his cartwheels. Room 417 was different. The patient there had been admitted 6 months ago, and unlike most of the high-profile cases who came and went within weeks, she remained. Marcus knew only what the rumor mill provided. Her name was Sophia Callahan. She was 26 years old. Her mother was General Catherine Callahan, deputy commander of the Defense Intelligence Agency, one of the most powerful women in the American military, and Sophia was fighting something that no amount of power or money or influence could fix. Something that lived inside her own mind and dragged her under without warning. Marcus first encountered her on a Tuesday night in October, 3 months after she arrived. He was buffing the floor outside her room when he heard the sound, a low keening that built into something raw and desperate. He had heard similar sounds before, in hospice when Dana was dying, the sound of a person confronting something too large to contain. He should have walked away. Protocol demanded that he notify the nursing station and continue his rounds. Instead, he knocked twice on the door and pushed it open. Sophia was sitting on the floor beside her bed, knees drawn to her chest, rocking back and forth in the blue-white glow of medical monitors. She looked up at him with eyes that held no recognition, only terror. Marcus did not speak. He simply lowered himself to the floor across from her, maintaining enough distance that she did not feel cornered, and he waited. Minutes passed. Her breathing slowed. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" Marcus told her his name. He told her he cleaned the floors. He told her that sometimes the night felt too big and that sitting on the floor was as good a place as any to wait for it to pass. Sophia stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, and something shifted in her expression, some wall lowering just enough to let him see the person behind the panic. That was how it began. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged that neither of them acknowledged directly. Marcus would arrive at room 417 during his rounds, usually around 1 in the morning. Sometimes Sophia was asleep, and he would simply empty her wastebasket and move on. But more often, she was awake, sitting in the chair by the window or pacing the small space between her bed and the door. On those nights, he would pause his work. They would talk, or more accurately, she would talk and he would listen. She told him about the pressure of growing up as Catherine Callahan's daughter, about expectations so heavy they had crushed something essential inside her. She told him about the first breakdown at 22, the second at 24, the current admission that had stretched into months because nothing seemed to work and no one knew what to do with a patient who did not respond to standard protocols. Marcus never asked probing questions. He never offered advice or empty reassurances. He simply listened, nodding occasionally, asking only enough to show that he was present. His gift, if it could be called that, was the ability to make people feel heard without requiring anything in return. He had developed this skill during Dana's illness, sitting through countless appointments where doctors spoke in jargon and statistics, while his wife's eyes begged for someone to simply acknowledge her fear. One night in December, Sophia's psychiatrist recommended transferring her to a more specialized facility in Connecticut. The episode that followed lasted 3 hours and left her sedated and strapped to her bed. When Marcus arrived for his shift that night, he found her awake, the restraints removed, but the fear still visible in every line of her body. She looked at him with something approaching desperation. "Please don't let them take me away." Marcus sat with her until 4 in the morning, long past the end of his scheduled rounds. He told her about Lily, about the apartment with the leaky faucet he kept meaning to fix, about the way his daughter insisted on naming every bird that visited their window feeder. By the time he left, Sophia was calm. The transfer was postponed. 2 weeks later, the night supervisor offered Marcus a promotion. A position had opened on the day shift in the administrative wing. Better hours, better pay, a chance to move up. Marcus declined. He told the supervisor he preferred nights, preferred the quiet, preferred the solitude. What he did not say was that he had made a silent promise to a young woman in room 417, a promise to be present in the small hours when the darkness pressed close. The supervisor shrugged and moved on. In a hospital this large, one janitor's career preferences barely registered. Sophia noticed the change in his schedule, or rather, the lack of change. "You could have left," she said one night. "You could have moved to days." Marcus finished emptying her trash before answering. "Days are too loud." Sophia almost smiled. That was not a real answer. "No," Marcus agreed. It was not. They looked at each other in the dim light of her room, and something passed between them that neither needed to name. General Catherine Callahan visited her daughter every Sunday afternoon at precisely 2 o'clock. She arrived in a black government SUV with tinted windows, flanked by aides who waited in the corridor while she spent exactly 90 minutes in room 417. Marcus had never seen her during these visits. His shift did not begin until 11 at night, long after the general had returned to whatever secure facility housed her office. But he knew about the visits from the nursing staff, from the way Sophia's demeanor shifted on Sunday evenings, oscillating between desperate hope and familiar disappointment. The first time Catherine noticed Marcus, it was not during a visit. It was during an unscheduled late-night arrival, sometime in February, when intelligence briefings had kept her at the Pentagon until midnight, and guilt had driven her to make the 40-minute drive to Whitmore despite the hour. She strode through the corridor outside room 417 and found it blocked by a janitor's cart. Marcus looked up from his mopping to find a woman staring at him with the kind of calculated assessment usually reserved for threat evaluations. The general said nothing. She simply stepped around the cart and entered her daughter's room. But Marcus felt her attention land on him like a targeting laser, felt himself catalogued and filed and flagged for future reference. He finished his mopping and moved on, but the back of his neck prickled for the rest of his shift. The following Sunday, Sophia mentioned it. "My mother asked about you." Marcus paused in his work, waiting. Sophia's voice carried a strange mixture of amusement and warning. She wanted to know why the night janitor was always outside my room. She used the word always. Marcus absorbed this information. "What did you tell her?" Sophia turned to look out the window at the parking lot below. "I told her you were doing your job, that the floor does not clean itself." Marcus nodded slowly. That was the truth. "Yes," Sophia agreed, but she did not like it. "My mother does not like things she cannot control. And you, Marcus Doherty, are something she cannot control." The conversation that followed between Catherine and Sophia took place the next Sunday afternoon. Marcus was not present, but he learned about it later from the way Sophia sat rigid in her chair that evening, her fingers gripping the armrests like she was bracing for impact. "My mother thinks you are inappropriate," she said without preamble, when Marcus entered the room. Marcus waited. Sophia continued, her voice flat. "She says it is not normal for a cleaning staff member to spend so much time in a patient's room. She says there are concerns. She says she is going to speak with hospital administration." Marcus set down his supplies. "What do you think?" Sophia finally looked at him. "I think my mother has spent her entire career commanding people, and she does not know how to exist in a situation where commands do not apply. I think she loves me in the only way she knows how, which is to control everything around me in the hope that control will keep me safe. And I think she is wrong about you." She paused, but being wrong has never stopped my mother before. The weeks that followed carried an undercurrent of tension that Marcus felt every time he turned a corner. He noticed security guards paying more attention to his movements. He noticed his supervisor asking questions about his rounds, questions that had never been asked before. He noticed the way conversations stopped when he entered the break room. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting, and Marcus understood, with the certainty of a man who had learned to read institutional weather patterns, that his quiet life was about to become significantly less quiet. The night it happened was a Thursday in late March. Marcus was finishing his rounds in the East Wing when his radio crackled with an alert. "Room 417. Patient in distress." He abandoned his cart and moved through the corridors faster than protocol allowed, arriving to find two nurses attempting to calm Sophia, who had somehow wedged herself into the corner between her bed and the wall. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, her eyes unfocused, her hands clawing at the wallpaper as if trying to dig through to somewhere else. Marcus did what he had done before. He lowered himself to the floor outside her corner, giving her space, giving her time. The nurses watched, uncertain. One of them moved toward the medication cart. "Wait," Marcus said. The word came out quiet but firm. "Just wait." The nurse hesitated. Minutes passed. Sophia's breathing began to slow. Her hands stopped their frantic scratching. She looked at Marcus, and recognition flickered in her eyes. "You came." "I heard the code," Marcus said simply. Sophia's face crumpled. She did not cry. She simply crumpled, like a structure that had been holding itself upright through sheer force of will and had finally run out of strength. She was calm enough to return to bed 20 minutes later. Marcus stayed another hour, sitting in the chair by the door, watching the monitors track her vital signs as she drifted toward something resembling sleep. He did not notice the security camera in the corner of the room, its red light blinking steadily. He did not notice the timestamp being logged, the footage being flagged, the report being generated and routed to a terminal in an office where General Catherine Callahan reviewed every piece of information related to her daughter's care. The summons came 3 nights later. Marcus was mopping the corridor outside the cafeteria when 2 security guards approached, their expressions professionally blank. "You need to come with us." Marcus set down his mop. "May I ask why?" The taller guard shook his head. "Just come with us." They walked him through the hospital like a prisoner, 1 guard in front, 1 behind, their pace brisk enough that Marcus had to work to keep up. They did not take him to his supervisor's office. They did not take him to human resources. They took him to a conference room on the 4th floor, where General Catherine Callahan sat alone at the head of a long table, a manila folder open in front of her. The general did not invite him to sit. She did not introduce herself. She simply looked at him with the same assessing gaze she had turned on him months ago in the corridor, and she began to speak. "You have been spending unauthorized time in my daughter's room. You have been engaging in conversations that are not part of your job description. You have been present during medical episodes when you should have notified staff and removed yourself from the situation." Marcus said nothing. Catherine continued. "I have reviewed the security footage. I have spoken with the nursing staff. I have compiled a record of your interactions with my daughter, and I have concluded that your behavior constitutes a violation of hospital policy and potentially a threat to patient welfare." Marcus absorbed her words. He had known this moment would come. He had known it the first time he sat on the floor of room 417 and waited for a terrified young woman to remember how to breathe. What he had not known was how it would feel. Standing here in a conference room designed to intimidate, listening to someone reduce months of careful attention into a list of policy violations. "General Callahan," he said finally, "I understand your concern, but with respect, your daughter was having a panic attack. The nurses were about to sedate her. I helped her calm down without medication. That is what happened." Catherine's expression did not change. "You are a janitor, Mr. Doherty. You are not a therapist. You are not a nurse. You are not qualified to make decisions about my daughter's care." Marcus met her gaze. "I am a person who was present when she needed someone to be present. I do not believe that requires a qualification." The silence that followed lasted nearly a minute. Then Catherine closed the folder in front of her and stood. "You are being reassigned to the maintenance facility on the South Campus. Your access to the main hospital building has been revoked, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." Marcus did not argue. He did not defend himself further. He simply nodded and turned toward the door, where the 2 guards were waiting to escort him out. They were halfway down the corridor toward the service elevator when he heard it. A door opening behind them, footsteps, unsteady but determined, and then a voice, raw from disuse and medication, cutting through the institutional hush like a blade. "Mom, stop." Marcus turned. Sophia stood in the doorway of her room, one hand braced against the frame for support, her hospital gown rumpled, her feet bare against the cold tile. She was looking past Marcus, past the security guards, directly at her mother, who had emerged from the conference room and frozen mid-stride. "That is his name," Sophia said. Her voice carried the particular clarity of someone who had decided to stop being afraid. "That is Marcus Doherty. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic before his wife got sick. He has a daughter named Lily who is 7 years old and wants to be a veterinarian. He is the only person in this building who has ever looked at me like I am a person instead of a problem to be solved." Her breathing was rapid, but her words remained steady. "He is the reason I am still standing here, Mom. He is the reason I did not ask for the transfer to Connecticut. He is the reason I have not given up. So, whatever you think you are doing right now, whatever you think you are protecting me from, you need to stop, because you are wrong." The corridor had gone absolutely silent. The security guards stood frozen, uncertain whether to continue their assigned task. General Catherine Callahan stared at her daughter with an expression Marcus could not read, something shifting behind her eyes that might have been shock or recognition or the first fracture in a wall built over decades. Marcus had never told anyone at Whitmore about his military service. He had never told anyone about Dana's illness, about the desperate months when he had learned to read vital signs and administer medications because the home health aide could only come 3 times a week. He had buried that part of himself beneath the gray uniform and the cleaning cart, beneath the careful anonymity of a man who had decided that invisibility was the safest way to survive. But Sophia had seen through it. She had listened to the stories he told her about Lily, about the apartment, about the small rituals that kept his grief at bay, and she had heard what he was not saying. She had looked up his name, researched his background, assembled the pieces of a history he had tried to erase, and now she was standing in a hospital corridor, barely strong enough to stay upright, using that knowledge to defend him. The truth Marcus had never claimed went back further than anyone knew. 4 years ago, before Dana got sick, before Lily started school, before he became a man who pushed a mop through military hospital corridors, Marcus had been driving through Georgetown on a rainy night in April. He had been coming home from a job interview, another attempt to restart the career he had put on hold when Dana's symptoms first appeared. The rain was heavy, visibility poor, and he almost did not see the woman on the pedestrian bridge over Rock Creek Parkway. She was standing on the wrong side of the railing, her white blouse plastered to her skin, her face turned up toward the sky like she was waiting for something. Marcus pulled over. He did not think about protocol or liability or the proper way to approach someone in crisis. He simply got out of his car and walked toward her, his voice calm and steady, the voice he had used in Afghanistan when wounded soldiers needed someone to tell them they would make it through. He did not know her name. He did not ask. He simply stood on the bridge in the rain, keeping his distance, talking about nothing in particular. The weather, the way the creek sounded when it ran high, the small coffee shop on M Street that made the best croissants he had ever tasted. After 20 minutes, she climbed back over the railing. After 30 minutes, he walked her to his car and drove her to Georgetown University Hospital. He gave the intake nurse his name and number in case anyone needed to reach him, and then he drove home and never spoke of it again. 3 months later, Dana was diagnosed. The world narrowed to doctor's appointments and treatment plans, and the slow, terrible process of watching someone you love disappear. Marcus forgot about the woman on the bridge. He forgot about a lot of things during those years, buried them beneath the weight of caregiving and grief and the desperate need to keep moving forward. He did not recognize Sophia Callahan when she arrived at Whitmore. She was thinner, her hair a different color, her face marked by years of medication and therapy, and the particular exhaustion of fighting a battle that never quite ended. But she recognized him. She recognized him the first night he knocked on her door, the first time he sat on the floor across from her and waited for the panic to pass. She had known who he was from the beginning, and she had said nothing. She had kept his secret as carefully as he kept hers, understanding somehow that he did not want credit or recognition or gratitude. He wanted only to be present. He wanted only to matter in the way that mattered least to the world and most to the people who needed it. Now, Lily's question echoed in Marcus's mind, a question she had asked 6 months ago when he told her he was staying on the night shift instead of taking the promotion. "Daddy, why do you let people forget about you?" He had not known how to answer then. He was not sure he knew how to answer now. But standing in the corridor of Whitmore Military Medical Center, watching Sophia Callahan refuse to let him disappear, he understood something he had never quite grasped before. The erasure he had chosen was not protection, it was surrender. And some people, some stubborn, beautiful people, refused to let you surrender. General Catherine Callahan had not moved. She stood in the corridor outside the conference room, watching her daughter with an expression that had shifted from shock to something more complicated. Marcus recognized that expression. He had seen it on his own face in the mirror during Dana's final weeks. The look of someone realizing that everything they thought they understood was built on foundations that had already crumbled. Catherine had spent 30 years in military intelligence. She had risen through ranks that did not welcome women, had commanded operations that would never be declassified, had learned to read people the way most people read books, scanning for tells and weaknesses and leverage points. She had applied those same skills to motherhood, treating Sophia's illness as an enemy to be outmaneuvered, her recovery as an objective to be achieved through superior strategy and overwhelming force. And she had failed. She had failed in ways that no tactical genius could compensate for, in ways that no amount of security footage or personnel files could explain. Her daughter was standing in a hospital corridor, defending a janitor, and the look in Sophia's eyes was something Catherine had not seen in years. It was clarity. It was conviction. It was the look of someone who had found something worth fighting for and refused to let go. "You should have told me," Catherine said finally. Her voice was quieter than Marcus had ever heard it. "You should have told me that you knew him, that there was history. Would it have mattered? Would it have changed how you saw him, or would it have just given you another way to control the situation?" Catherine flinched. It was slight, barely perceptible, but Marcus caught it. He had become adept at reading small movements during Dana's illness, when a twitch of the eyebrow or a slight tension in the jaw could signal the difference between a good day and a bad one. Sophia continued, "You have spent my entire life trying to protect me, Mom, and I know you love me. I know that every decision you made came from that love, but somewhere along the way, protecting me became controlling me, and controlling me became isolating me, and isolating me nearly killed me." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. "The only person who ever just sat with me, who ever let me be broken without trying to fix me or medicate me or transfer me somewhere else, was a janitor who cleaned the floors. And you were about to fire him." The silence stretched. Security guards shuffled uncomfortably. Somewhere down the corridor, a monitor beeped. Catherine Callahan, deputy commander of the Defense Intelligence Agency, faced her daughter and did something Marcus suspected she had not done in years. She lowered her defenses. "I am sorry." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "I am sorry that I made you feel controlled instead of loved. I am sorry that I did not see what you needed. I am sorry about Mr. Doherty." Catherine turned to look at Marcus, and her expression held something that might have been respect. "I am sorry about a great many things." The apology hung in the air like something fragile, something that could shatter if anyone moved too quickly. Sophia took a breath. "That is a start. It is not enough, but it is a start." The fallout took weeks to sort through. Marcus was reinstated to his position, his personnel file scrubbed of the incident. The security footage from room 417 was deleted. The guards who had escorted him from the building were quietly reassigned to other facilities. General Catherine Callahan made no public statement, issued no formal apology, but word spread through Whitmore in the way that word always spread through institutions built on secrets and silence. Marcus returned to his rounds, to his mop and his cart and the quiet hours between midnight and dawn. But things were different now. Nurses nodded at him in the corridors. The night supervisor stopped asking questions about his schedule. Sophia's door was no longer a place he approached with caution. It was simply part of his route, a room where a young woman was slowly learning to believe that recovery was possible. A month after the incident, Catherine requested a meeting. Not in a conference room, not with security present. In the small garden courtyard behind the hospital, where patients sometimes sat on sunny afternoons and where the spring flowers were just beginning to bloom. She was already there when Marcus arrived, sitting on a bench with her hands folded in her lap. She looked smaller somehow, less like a general and more like a mother who had spent too many years afraid. "He saved her life," Catherine said without preamble. 4 years ago, on the bridge. I did not know until I read the intake report from Georgetown." She paused. "I spent 30 years in intelligence, and I did not know that the man mopping my daughter's floor was the same man who talked her off a bridge." Marcus sat down on the bench, leaving space between them. She was struggling. "I happened to be there. That is all." Catherine shook her head. That is not all. You happened to be there, and then you happened to disappear. You did not sell your story to the press. You did not contact our family. You did not try to leverage the connection. You simply vanished. Why? Marcus considered the question. Because it was not my story to tell, and because I had other things to worry about. My wife was dying. My daughter needed me. What happened on that bridge mattered, but it was not the only thing that mattered. Catherine studied him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a short, rueful sound, the laugh of someone confronting the limits of their own understanding. I have spent my career identifying threats and neutralizing them. I looked at you and saw a threat to my daughter's stability. I never considered that you might be the opposite. I never considered that some people help simply because helping is what they do. She stood, brushing invisible dust from her slacks. I cannot give you back the time you lost. I cannot undo the investigation or the interrogation, but I can make sure it does not happen again. And I can say thank you. For the bridge, for the hospital, for everything you did that you never asked to be recognized for. Marcus nodded. I do not need recognition, General. I just needed to keep doing my job. Catherine smiled faintly. I know. That is what makes you different from everyone else in this building. Sophia was discharged from Whitmore 6 weeks later. It was not a cure, not a complete recovery, but it was progress. She moved to an apartment in Arlington, close enough to the hospital for outpatient appointments, far enough to feel like a different chapter. She enrolled in a graduate program in psychology, determined to understand the thing that had shaped her life and maybe help others who were fighting similar battles. A week before she left, she asked Marcus to bring Lily to the hospital. She wanted to meet the daughter he talked about so often, the girl with the bird names and the blue box macaroni preferences. Marcus hesitated. His worlds had always been separate, work and home, janitor and father. Bridging them felt dangerous, but Lily had asked about his job. She had asked why he came home smelling like medicine, why he looked tired but peaceful when he walked through the door each morning. And Marcus realized that keeping her separate from this part of his life was its own kind of erasure, its own form of disappearing. They met in the garden courtyard on a Saturday afternoon. Lily wore her favorite yellow dress, the one with the sunflowers on the hem. Sophia wore jeans and a sweater, looking healthier than Marcus had ever seen her. The two of them sat on the bench where Marcus had talked with Catherine, and they fed crackers to the sparrows that gathered near the fountain. Your daddy talks about you all the time, Sophia said. He says you name all the birds at your window. Lily nodded seriously. The red one is Fernando. The brown one is Miss Pemberton. The really tiny one is Gregory Jr. Sophia smiled. Why Gregory Jr.? Because there was a Gregory Sr., Lily explained, but he flew away. I think he went to Florida. Sophia laughed, and it was a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep and surprised the person making it. Marcus watched them from across the courtyard, two people from entirely different worlds finding common ground in the names of imaginary birds. He thought about Dana, about the life they had built and lost and rebuilt in a different form. He thought about the bridge in Georgetown and the hospital corridor and all the moments when he could have walked away and did not. Sophia left Whitmore on a Thursday morning in late May. Marcus was not there for the discharge. He was home with Lily, making breakfast, explaining why pancakes required patience and even heat. But Sophia left something for him at the front desk, a small envelope with his name written in careful script. Inside was a photograph. It showed the garden courtyard, the bench, the fountain, surrounded by sparrows. On the back, Sophia had written, "Thank you for sitting with me in the dark, for staying when staying was hard, for being someone who helps because helping is what you do. I will not forget. I will not let anyone else forget either." Months passed. Summer faded into autumn, autumn into winter. Marcus continued his rounds at Whitmore, continued his quiet life with Lily, continued being a man who cleaned floors and listened when listening mattered. But something had changed. He carried himself differently. He met people's eyes in the corridors. He answered questions about himself without deflecting to the weather or the floor wax or the broken handle on the utility closet. He had spent years training himself to disappear, to become invisible, to exist in the margins where no one expected anything and no one remembered his name. Sophia had refused to let that stand. Catherine had been forced to see him as a person instead of a variable. And slowly, reluctantly, Marcus began to see himself that way too. The invitation arrived in December, a heavy cream envelope with embossed lettering addressed to Marcus Doherty and family. Inside was a card requesting his presence at a dinner in Alexandria, hosted by General Catherine Callahan and her daughter Sophia. No security clearance required. No agenda, just dinner. Lily helped him pick out a tie. She rejected 3 options before settling on the dark blue one with tiny stars, declaring it appropriately serious but not boring. Marcus put on the only suit he owned, the one he had bought for Dana's funeral and worn exactly twice since then. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a man he barely recognized. Not a janitor, not a widower, just a man going to dinner with people who knew his name. The Callahan house was smaller than he expected. A brick colonial in a quiet neighborhood, with a garden out front and a wreath on the door that looked handmade. Sophia answered when they knocked, wearing a sweater with a pattern of small birds that made Lily gasp with delight. The evening was not elegant. The roast was slightly overcooked. Lily spilled her apple juice on the tablecloth. Catherine told a story about a botched intelligence operation that had her laughing at her own mistakes. Sophia showed Lily her collection of bird figurines, accumulated over years of hospital stays and therapy appointments, and Marcus sat at a table where no one expected him to be invisible, where no one looked past him or through him or around him. After dinner, Catherine walked him to the door, while Sophia and Lily discussed the merits of various bird species. She handed him a business card, plain white with a phone number and nothing else. "This is my personal line," she said. "If you ever need anything, if Lily ever needs anything, you call this number." Marcus took the card. "General, I am not sure I am comfortable accepting favors." Catherine shook her head. "This is not a favor, Mr. Doherty. This is recognition. You spent years making yourself invisible because you thought that was what the world required of you. I am telling you that it does not. Not anymore." 6 months later, Marcus left Whitmore. Not because he was fired, not because he was pushed out, but because he had finally accepted that he could be more than a man who cleaned floors. He enrolled in a nursing program at Northern Virginia Community College, using the GI Bill benefits he had never touched. He still worked nights, but now they were clinical rotations at local hospitals, learning the skills he had picked up informally during Dana's illness and Afghanistan, and countless hours in room 417. Lily made him a card for his first day of classes. It showed a stick figure in blue scrubs surrounded by birds of various colors. "Daddy the Helper," it said in wobbly letters. With his bird friends, he kept the card in his textbook. He kept Sophia's photograph in his wallet. He kept moving forward, one careful step at a time, toward a life where his name meant something and his presence mattered, and no one would ever drag him away in silence again. The last time he saw Sophia, she was presenting her graduate thesis on peer support in psychiatric settings. Marcus sat in the back of the auditorium with Lily, watching a young woman who had once huddled on the floor of a hospital room now standing at a podium, speaking with clarity and conviction about the importance of human connection in recovery. She caught his eye during the Q&A session. She smiled, and in that smile was everything they had never needed to say out loud. The bridge in Georgetown, the hospital corridor, the moment when she called his name and refused to let the world erase him. After the presentation, Sophia found them in the lobby. Lily immediately began describing the bird situation at their new apartment, which apparently involved a cardinal named Sir Reginald, who had very strong opinions about seed quality. Sophia listened with the same careful attention Marcus remembered from their late-night conversations, the attention of someone who understood that small things mattered precisely because they were small. She hugged Marcus before they left. It was brief, appropriate, the kind of hug colleagues might share after a long project, but her whisper was for him alone. "Thank you for teaching me that showing up is enough, that being present is its own kind of heroism." Marcus drove home through streets lit by early spring sunshine. Lily chattered in the back seat about Sir Reginald and graduate school, and whether nursing scrubs came in yellow because yellow was objectively the best color. He listened to her voice and thought about all the ways a life could change direction. All the bridges crossed and corridors walked, and moments when a choice was made not to disappear. His name was Marcus Doherty. He was 38 years old, a single father, a nursing student, a man who had once served overseas and once sat on a rainy bridge and once pushed a mop through hospital corridors where generals recovered and colonels received treatment and a young woman learned that she was not alone. He had spent years training himself to vanish. Now, finally, he was learning to stay.